What's up everybody, my name is Fritz and welcome to the channel. Whether you're just getting into BMWs or you want to save some money by doing the routine maintenance yourself, you also want to save some money by picking up the appropriate tools. Not necessarily the cheapest tools, but the ones that are going to give you the most value. And that's exactly what we have here on the table today. With this entire kit, you'll be able to turn every nut and bolt on your BMW, specifically the F chassis BMW. But if you're coming from an E chassis or a G chassis and I missed something, please let me know in the comment section. In addition to the value of being able to turn every nut and bolt on the BMW, this kit delivers it in a very compact form factor. So we have a couple of toolboxes right here, as well as a wrench set, and then a couple of torque wrenches that will come in their own cases. So this is something that you can very easily store away in a chest or on a shelf in your garage. Having something like this in its form factor, if you know that you need just your 6-point hexes, it's right here. E Torx here. Your wrenches here or down there. So it's gonna be able to minimize the headache of having to keep everything organized because it comes in a very organized form upon delivery. So let's get started with our 6-point sockets. The socket set that we have here today comes to us from Tecton. In the metric sizes, it goes all the way from 6 for those smaller hose clamps all the way to 24. So this can cover you for even the oil pressure sensor. These bigger sizes are going to be great for your suspension work, and then everything else in between is going to cover you for those normal bolts that you'll see. In these standard sizes, it goes from 1/4 all the way to 1 inch. And the thing that I really like about this kit is that for every size, we get a deep well variant as well as a standard size. So in those suspension components that we were talking about earlier, they often require the same size counter hold as you loosen the bolt. So you're going to be able to accomplish that goal with your ratchet and the breaker bar that you see here. You also get a couple of extensions and a universal joint. Now, the reason why I selected this kit is because if you plan to do any upgrades, say to those suspension components, and you don't want to go OEM, say you want to go SPL or another brand, usually the aftermarket parts come in standard variants. So this is going to future-proof you in the event that that happens. Another reason why I chose this set is because of the inclusion of the breaker bar. If you go with the set that just includes the metric sizes, you actually lose this. And this is critical if you want to remove your wheel lugs. That's going to be a 17mm. And I would recommend a deep well in order to get away from your wheels. If you do have the wheel locks that come from the dealership, you're going to want to use the 19. So even on the bigger fasteners, you're covered here. The thing that I like about the included ratchet is that it's their 90-tooth variant and a quick release. So you can work even in the tightest of areas. And when you have the socket on, you can see that it's not weak at all. You can't put it on until you push in that quick release. And rather than struggling to remove it, especially if you're in a tight area, or if you have grease on your hands, you can simply pop it off and you're good to go. The two extensions that we have here are a 6 and a 3-inch, and the universal joint is actually really smooth in its action. And getting back into the breaker bar, don't discount this as just your wheel lug removal tool. As I mentioned earlier, with those suspension components like the control arms that require you to use the same size fastener as the removal size as well as the counter hold, the breaker bar actually helped me remove the rear trailing arm, and it made it a whole lot easier because of all this extra leverage compared to just the ratchet. And in fact, you can use the wrench set that we'll get to towards the end. So in terms of hex bolts, this kit will have you covered. I haven't needed to go outside of this set since I actually picked it up. But another thing that you want to pair with this socket set is a set of adapters that can convert to 3/8 or from 3/8. Most importantly here is going to be the one for the wheel lugs, because most torque wrenches that go up to 140 Newton meters, which is what the spec is for most F chassis, is a 1/2 inch anvil variant. So we need to convert it to 3/8 in order to accommodate our 17 or 19mm socket. And while we're here, let's talk a little bit about torque wrenches. In the beginning, all that you really need is a 1/2 inch and a 3/8 torque wrench. Unless you're working with internal engine components that require the most precise measurements, you can save your money and skip the 1/4 inch for now. For the 2 torque wrenches that you do need, I would recommend a click style because it's a little bit more accurate when you're dialing in your settings. Just remember to wind it all the way back down to 0 in order to preserve its accuracy because it works on a spring-loaded system. But if you want something that's a little bit less maintenance, something that you can pick up right away and it's gonna be ready for you all the time, especially for those repeatable tasks like your wheel lugs, then a split beam is the way to go. But to tell you the truth, in the beginning, I would say if you really want a split beam, get this for your 1/2 inch and your 3/8 should be a click style. Some of the things that you're gonna be using your 3/8 for really need more precise measurements, like the oil filter cap, the oil drain plug, the oil filter housing, as well as the oil cooler housing. Those are things that you want a little bit more precision on. So that's why I would say click style. And trust me, in the beginning, you do not need an electronic style torque wrench. It has actually been several years since I started working on cars, and I've only recently got into electronic torque wrenches. And to tell you the truth, once you get used to the mechanical feedback of a torque wrench like this, or even the click style, the electronic torque wrenches feel a little bit removed. So although they are extremely useful when you get to that point and have a bunch of features, these still feel really good in the hand, and the amount of feedback that they give, there's nothing like it. Another thing that you're gonna wanna convert is your ratchet from 3/8 to either 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch. And this is gonna be very important for the next set of sockets that we have. Our next set of sockets comes to us from Auto Tools, which will cover us for our external Torx, or E Torx for short, that range from E4 all the way to E22, the regular Torx that go from 8 to T60. At $20, this is a tremendous value. And this is exactly where our adapters come into play. Because in order to accommodate these bigger sizes, you're going to need that 1/2 inch adapter in order to snap it into place, and then attach it to our ratchet or breaker bar. The other adapter will cover us from E4 to E8, as well as T8 to T30. However, the more common sizes that we're going to be working with as far as external Torx are going to be E10 to E20. And it's a good thing that these are already in the 3/8 variant, so no adapter is necessary. We also have 3/8 for the T40 all the way to the T55. In terms of durability, this kit has held up great. I've had no issues with it whatsoever, even after upgrading the front and rear sway bars, a full coilover system, and a carbon fiber strut brace retrofit. Despite all of that, this kit has held up tremendously, and at $20, I definitely feel that I got my money's worth, and if anything goes wrong, this is packed with a lifetime warranty as well. Now, my wrench recommendation might be a little controversial here because the closed end uses a spline drive design, but hear me out first. The Gear Wrench 120 XP is an excellent set to have because it covers you from 8 to 24, and the 120 positions on the closed end is going to make those tight areas much more manageable and bring down your working time significantly. What I would recommend in terms of breaking off nuts and bolts is use the open end, or if you have to have a counter hold, use this as a static end and use the socket set that we recommended earlier from Technin to break it loose. If you need to use the ratcheting end, use it on nuts and bolts that have already been loosened. That way you reduce the risk of rounding them off. The reason why I went with a spline drive is because of those E Torx. If you take a look at an E Torx fastener that we have here, when we put on our spline drive, it's a pretty tight fit. Not perfect because it's not E Torx, but tight enough to get the job done. And with the 120 positions on this wrench, it makes working in those tight areas much more manageable. Comparing that to the standard 12 point, you can see that there's a little bit more room here. You'll be able to feel it at the base. There's much more give at the base, allowing for this wobble there. Now, it might seem really fractional, especially with what you're seeing on camera, but when it comes to working with those E Torx in the tightest of areas like the oil filter housing and oil cooler gaskets, you're gonna really want the tightest fit as possible. Honestly, flex head wrenches are a convenience and they're helpful at times, but they're not necessary. And although you could get this kit with flex heads, it only goes from 8 to 19. So go ahead and get the standard wrenches that give you the full range of 8 to 24. But I understand, if you're completely against spline drives and you're worried about rounding off the heads of your fasteners, I can make a recommendation for a 6-point set down in the description. But trust me, if you're gonna break the rule when it comes to your spline drives, this is the one to do it with. This long reach 8mm flex head wrench. It's gonna make getting to that bottom oil filter housing bolt a whole lot easier. The spline drive will allow you to grab onto the head of that fastener better than a 12-point and certainly better than a 6-point. Pairing that with its flex head will allow you to navigate to that bolt comfortably. And then the long reach of this wrench will give you enough leverage to break it loose and not have to deal with having your hand down there as well. The first time I had to do this, I had to actually break it off with a regular size 8mm spline drive, but because I didn't have the flex head, as soon as it was broken off, I had to go back to a 12-point to completely remove it. It was a complete waste of time that could have been sped up by having something like this. And the reason why we want both of our sockets as well as our wrenches to go all the way up to 24mm is because the biggest fastener that I found on the M235i is a sensor actually, and it's the oil pressure sensor right here. And this one actually broke because I was careless when I was removing the engine support brace, but because it is a sensor, it could go bad at any time as well. So making sure that you have a socket or a wrench in order to tighten it down, as well as remove it if it goes bad, is gonna be very important. Now, the one set of tools that wouldn't fit on our table with everything else is of course our jack and jack stands, for which you'll have a hard time finding a better value than what you'll see at Harbor Freight. The setup that we have here today is great for lowered cars, but if your car isn't lowered and you don't plan to lower it, getting the regular 3-ton Pittsburgh jack is the way to go. I had one that lasted me over 7 years. It's only recently that I let it go because I have these two, which are great for a lowered car. The long reach low profile jack can get to that center jack point no problem, unless of course your car is a little bit too low and has a front lip. Then you're gonna want a secondary low profile jack to lift up one corner, giving you access to get in your main jack and then evenly line up your 2 jack stands. And unless you need the car up on all 4 corners, all that you really need, especially in the beginning, is just one set of jack stands, and then you can get wheel chocks for the wheels that are grounded. And the reason why I recommend this setup as opposed to something like ramps is that although ramps are extremely useful and can save you some time, and they're a little bit more convenient to use, when you have to do something that requires you to remove the wheel, then they're rendered useless. But whether your wheels are on or off, they can always be sitting on jack stands. This brings us to the last toolkit that you'll need in order to completely work on your BMW. And it's something that you don't necessarily need to pick up right away. That's why it's not directly displayed on the table right now. But if you plan to do any interior work on the car, of course you're going to want to pick up a set of plastic trim tool removal pieces. It's going to make removing those parts a whole lot easier and without damaging them. But I would recommend picking up a kit that includes these pieces along with some pick tools. This is going to make removing the electronic connections as well as certain retaining clips a whole lot easier. The set that I'm going to include down in the description includes both of these, but alongside with those plastic push rivet removal tool. So this kit coming in around $25 gives you a tremendous value. Of course, you can find some higher quality ones, but if you're just starting out, this is really all that you need. And through this entire kit that we went through on the table here, you should be able to handle whatever your BMW throws at you in terms of routine maintenance, preventive maintenance, and even upgrades. But if you feel that I left something out, please let me know in the comments as well as any other questions that you might have. All the resources from today's video will be linked down in the description. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos, and I'll see you in the next one.